Hey, I'm Sarah, and this is the Goddess in Training podcast. This isn't about being perfect or polished or having it all figured out. This is about what happens when you actually start listening to your body, your intuition, your patterns, your truth. I'm asking big questions and having real conversations, sometimes messy and sometimes magical, with people who've lived through it, grown through it, and still don't have all the answers. If you've ever doubted yourself, betrayed your gut, or wondered if you're the only one, you're not. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to another episode of Goddess in Training. I'm your host, Sarah, and today's conversation is one of those that feels predestined. Do you know what I mean? The kind where you get on the phone with someone and within minutes you're both like, wait, have we met before? Not in a logical timeline way, but in that soul recognition, synchronicity way. My guest today is Cynthia Abolafia, yoga therapist, longtime teacher, and practitioner of non-duality, and the author of a forthcoming book called Embodying the Goddess, How to Awaken Curiosity and Reverence on the Spiritual Path, releasing January 20th. And in this episode, we go deep, but we do it in a way that's grounded. We talk about Kundalini, not as a trendy buzzword, but as a real, sometimes intense, spiritual reorientation that can be beautiful, disorienting, and wildly physical. We talk about what Cynthia calls the transcendence hangover, that moment after you've touched the river of consciousness and then you're suddenly back in an airport trying to make your flight while reality is still vibrating. We also explore a question that honestly feels like one of the core spiritual questions of our time. Have our traditions taught us how to transcend, but forgotten to teach us how to return? How to come back into the body, back into the messy, holy, limited, luminous experience of being human without collapsing into judgment, bypassing, or spiritual performance. Cynthia offers a map that I loved so much I found myself just sitting back and letting it land. The 4 layers of reality, from physical form to thought and emotion, to intuition, to the void, and the invitation to hold it all without preference. Not, this is real and that isn't, but a full spectrum of spirituality, a symphony. And throughout our conversation, Cynthia keeps returning to 2 words that feel like a compass for this whole path. Words she uses to describe the goddess herself, curiosity and reverence. So, if you've ever had a spiritual opening through meditation, yoga, breathwork, psychedelics, grief, love, birth, loss, if you've ever felt the veil thin and then wondered how to live your actual life afterward, this episode is for you. Take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Goddess in Training. I'm your host, Sarah. I'm here today with Cynthia Abolafia, who has recently written a book called Embodying the Goddess. And I am so excited to have this conversation. Like so many of my podcast guests, I get on the phone and there's all of these synchronicities immediately. And I feel like, Cynthia, I feel like I know you already, that we've had some kind of interaction in the past, even though we haven't. So thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. I love that you are goddess in training too.
You know, I feel like we are all goddesses in training. And I'm so excited to read your book because I think you tap into that about how we have so much to learn from the goddesses, but also we are in this human form. So talk a little bit about your book and how you came up with the concept.
Maybe the concept came up with me. I'm not sure that I came up with the concept. I've been studying the goddess traditions for a long time. I'm a longtime yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for over 20 years. But even before that, I have had really a lifetime's worth of Kundalini awakenings. And so my interest in transcendent experience and the forms of the divine has been a lifelong journey for me. But specifically, it was with the Kundalini awakening that the form of the feminine as the divine, which really, I don't think it occurs to us to consider a divine that could be feminine because we're so conditioned into a masculine perspective on divinity that maybe it was a deconditioning process for me that helped me conceive of the book, because the book is really from this perspective of embodiment.
I love this idea
of transcendence versus embodiment. And this is something I talk a lot about on the podcast, and in my writing on Substack is, what does that actually mean? What is the difference and how have we maybe been a little bit misguided in our healing traditions in being drawn or pushed too much to the transcendent and not enough into our bodies, into the embodiment of it?
I think that's the core spiritual question of our time, because when you look around and you see what we've done to Mother Earth and how we treat our bodies, the planet, how we treat each other, it's only possible to have this level of disconnect when we're not honoring the sacredness, the divine nature of body and form, and specifically mother, the mother of the earth. But for a couple thousand years now, the narrative has shifted from a fairly well balanced masculine and feminine divinity to really only honoring the masculine side. And that is fairly new in human thought. But because it's been long enough now, I think we've forgotten that element of the feminine. And so even when we go back to try to reconstruct her or reframe her or give her properties, we don't really have anything to pull from. And so a lot of times the language we use for the divine feminine is itself very patriarchal and very biased. And so that's some of the decoding that I like to do is I look at history and deep history, but when you honor the father and then slowly eradicate the mother, and these are symbols, but the symbols meant something historically to people. Father sky, mother earth. There are so many different myths around this on so many different parts of the earth. And so where about 2,000 years ago was it that we began to really only lean into Father Sky? And what is the repercussion of that? Because it's been massive. It's changed humanity and it's changed our relationship to ourselves. But for me, the divine feminine is embodiment. She is the coming into form. So the masculine represents transcendence, the transcendent experience, stillness. And if we're going to put it in the most simple terms, and I always believe in the most simple terms, it's expand, contract, pause. We follow the breath. You follow the breath. What is our most basic experience? It's breath and heartbeat, breath beat, expand, contract, pause. But we have all of these. We carry expand, contract, which is pulsation, that's movement. And we carry the pause. The pause is the stillness. Expand, contract is the vibration. But in all of our religious traditions that we see out there right now, we're only talking about the pause. Let it go spirituality, transcend the body. Life is an illusion. Life is Maya. Life is suffering. These are all transcendence biases. The bias is across the board. I mean, impermanence is a transcendence bias because it's not saying impermanence and honor pulsation. It's saying impermanence and now let's get rid of. Let's let it go. Let's see that you're not that. But when you keep telling people you're not that, you're not that, you're not that, transcend it, but then you never finish the sentence and say, hey, guess what you are? When you never finish the sentence, you don't have anything to return to. They're death practices. We've been practicing death practices for 2,000 years.
Wow.
Salvation from the body, right? Death practices. Very appropriate at the moment of death. Buddhism is very appropriate. Yoga is very appropriate for the moment of death.
That is so mind-blowing to me because now I'm rethinking all of the things that I say over and over and over again. And you're right, they are all about transcending. And we talk about embodiment, but it's this kind of after effect. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, well, we have this meat sack too, but we're not really focusing on it and honoring it necessarily in the way that we should. So how do you propose we flip the narrative or encompass both the embodiment and the transcendence in the narrative?
I have turned to sacred text to help me understand different maps of reality that might offer me an alternative to what I've learned and what I've studied. And in the traditions that I currently study, which is tantric non-duality, goddess-based traditions. There are some really beautiful maps out there. One of the maps is about honoring the different levels and layers of reality. It states that there are 4 layers of the heart. Embodiment, or inclusive divinity, what I'm going to call the female side, feminine non-duality. The non-duality of the divine feminine is integrating those 4 levels equally and without preference for one level or another. And I can talk about the 4 layers if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please do. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it really is the framework of everything. And if we understand these 4 levels of reality, then it really allows us to place ourselves and where we are, and perhaps even where we're stuck. So the most out there level, the one that we can kind of all agree on, well, let's see about a statement like that. But the most out there level is physical form. So the physical matter, physical reality is this layer of being. It's a layer of vibration, right? It's a vibration in form. You can pick it up, you can hold it. This is where most of us nowadays in a scientific model, at least out there on planet Earth, are living. We live in this matter model of reality. We've actually like hook, line, sinker bought into it. And there are people out there where this model, this matter model is their religious model, right? And then now that's one layer of reality. If that's your layer of reality and you believe that only matter is real, and I know many people like this, then death is death. Nothing happens after death. It's final. You get this one life, and that's that. And if it can't be explained by science, it doesn't exist. And if it can't be tested and pushed and poked, it doesn't exist. There's a very hard line of thinking. Now, the next layer in from that, where the vibration gets a little more subtle, is the thought, emotion, perception layer of reality. Thought emotion is considered in the yogic traditions one thing, right? You can't separate a thought from an emotion. An emotion is really just a thought that's going around in circles over and over again, right? Like,
Right.
I should do the dishes. I should do the dishes. Now I'm calling it anxiety, right?
Yeah.
That's so thought and emotion are deeply tied together. And there are people out there who believe in that layer of reality as the whole model. Our thoughts and emotions create reality, right? Like this is where if you can change your thoughts and emotions, you can create a whole new reality for yourself. This is the level of looking at the subconscious, of looking at therapeutic applications, things like this, where my emotion creates my physical well-being. It creates my happiness. It creates disease is going to manifest if I'm emotionally dysregulated, right? So there's this vibrational tone to the thought emotion layer. Now, people on the matter model might be like, okay, that's not even close to true. Thoughts and emotions, that's not verifiable, right? So you're going to have some tension there. Now we get more subtle with our vibration. It's still vibration. It's still expand, contract, pause. Below thought and emotion, you have intuition. We have the subtle. It hasn't quite formed into a thought yet, but it's this vast field of subtle knowing, right? And this is the place where most people interested in spirituality get really, really interested. This is astral traveling. This is psychic connection. This is collective thinking, collective unconscious. This is deep intuition. The difference between intuition and thought is that when an intuition comes up, it really doesn't care whether you pay attention to it or not. Like an intuition is just going to like tell you something and then it's going to go quiet. Whereas a thought really cares if you pay attention to it, right? A thought is like, oh, you didn't hear me. I'm going to say it. Oh, I'm going to say it again. Like, I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say it. Like, that's the difference. A thought is going to be nagging. It's going to be really fully formed. Whereas an intuition is usually correct often. And it's often like, here it is. It's coming as a whisper. Here's the gift. It's subtle. And people get stuck on this layer too. Everything is energy. You know, don't go to the doctor. They're not going to help you. But do go to the psychic. They'll help you. Do a past life regression. That's what's going to heal you, right? So these are layers of reality. Now, below that layer, the even more subtle layer to that is what's called in the texts the void layer, total stillness. So total silence, the recognition of the heart of being, which is blemishless and still. By the way, you can get stuck on that layer too, the void. That's the transcendence bias. Everything is the void, nothing exists, all is stillness, right?
Yeah.
So now, what I call the divine feminine, what I call the recognition of the divine feminine is the ability to play any one of those 4 layers of reality, because it is a stringed instrument. This is an instrument without preference for one or the other. So like some days you might lean into the void, and some days you might lean into your intuition. And some days you might lean in and decide you need to go to the doctor or go to the therapist, right? But it's the ability to not be cutting off a whole section of your being, but to be able to play the fullness of your being the way that you would play a great symphony. And that's really what I call the divine feminine.
I love that analogy of the symphony. And it really makes me think about this duality, this thought that, which I feel all the time, that everything is correct, actually. Everything, there is no right or wrong, and it's all just layers. And it's not even just on a personal level, like, okay, well, if for you going to the doctor is the right thing to do, then that's the right thing. It's more all encompassing than that. Would you say that too, that what this allows is for the whole entire expression of everything that we experience without putting any judgment on any of it?
Absolutely. I mean, the moment we can play the symphony of our being is the moment we're free. That's sovereignty, right? Because who is it that is cutting off that ability within us? It's we're doing it to ourselves, right? Like I'm shutting down my own intuition when somebody has told me, sit down, be quiet, don't ask questions. And like, definitely don't say stuff like that, you little channeler, right? Like, who's doing that? Now, if somebody tells you you're at risk of not being loved because of going into that layer of your being, you might cut that layer of your being out. So reclaiming all of ourselves is reclaiming our agency and our wholeness. And then when you stop judging yourself for being complex, for being embodied, then why would you judge your friend or your neighbor for being complex and embodied, right? And in spirituality, we're judging each other all the time. Oh, that person is so unconscious. But what does that really mean? Like everybody's conscious, right? This is consciousness in form. So that's arrogant to say, hey, that person is so unconscious. Now, they might have trauma. They might be shut down and they might have cut out whole layers of their being. But that doesn't mean that I'm now better than that person.
No.
Right? So that's what I'm talking about. Yes, I agree 100% with what you're saying in terms of judging each other. I don't feel qualified to judge anybody. I am on a journey and I stumble and I fall, and there are layers of my being that are under exercised that I'm constantly having to go back to again and again. And I think that falling in love with that process in myself has allowed me to see that we are kind of all engaging in this big project called life. And maybe the more I can do inside myself, then the less I'm going to feel like I need to, go in and interfere with somebody else's big project of life.
You're right. Exactly. So, talk more about how you came to these conclusions and the role that Kundalini played in that. And for the listeners too, explain what Kundalini is.
Kundalini is a energetic spiritual awakening, a reorientation of reality. In the sacred texts and traditions that I study, Kundalini is originally described in the texts of Tantra, actually dualistic Tantra, interestingly enough. In about the 600s of the Common Era, the term is first used. And it's described as an energy that is a coil or a sprout that emerges out of the heart and creates reality. So all of reality is the vibration that comes out of the heart. Now we can go back to our map, right? This is exactly what I'm describing. It comes out of the heart, the void, it goes through reality, intuition, thought, matter, form, and then it reabsorbs again. So gagunk, 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 the heartbeat. Out, create, back in. Creation, maintenance, reabsorption. This is the map. And then as the concept of Kundalini develops over time, it then becomes a description of spiritual awakening into the deep realms of the physical being, the deep body, the deep heart, the deep resonance, the deep tone. And the symbol that we often hear nowadays for Kundalini is the serpent or the snake. I don't know where Kundalini transitioned from the heart to the tailbone, but that's where we hear of her now. A coiled serpent 3.5 times at the tailbone with her mouth pointed upwards. And then you strike her the way that you would, literally, this is what the text say, you strike the energy the way that you would strike a serpent. And when you strike a serpent, it goes rigid. It springs upward and it goes rigid. Isn't that a wild description? Very violent description.
Yeah.
But that's what Kundalini is described as. And for anybody who's had a Kundalini awakening, by the way, don't discount how violent it can be, right?
Mhm.
So for a lot of people, it's not a pleasant experience. No matter what gets advertised out there on the billboards, it's a deep reorientation and it's a deep shift into this line, which is what I thought and experienced and believed I knew before this moment, I now see isn't true at all. Now, sometimes that thought is so major that it's like, oh my goodness, I don't even exist at all. Right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes the Kundalini awakening isn't just a crumbling down in one giant swoop of like a belief or a belief structure. Sometimes it's like a massive shutting or crumbling of entire thought structures. So it's the spiritual reorientation. That's what it is. And it often comes with a very physical effect.
And so what was your personal experience with the Kundalini awakening?
I started having personal experiences that now I would call Kundalini awakening in a more subtle form when I was a child, including transcendent experiences where I would have glimpses out from the center of my being, seeing reality as one pulsating whole, not as separate. You know, wall, chair, table, human, shining with one vibration, called different things, but very transparent, very clearly just one thing. Those are more transcendent like experiences. But then when I was in my early 20s, I had what you could call a more classic, like energy rushing through my spine and very physical experiences where my body would shake and rock and go into spontaneous movements, a lot of times for hours at a time, a lot of times in the middle of the night when like it's really not fun to be going through really aggressive physical movements. There's a lot of variation on that. I know people who have a lot of different types of physical movements. So there's not a one size fits all to these experiences, but it can be very physical for people. And it was very physical and kinesthetic for me. Usually it comes along with some kind of erasure of your physical limits, your physical body, your physical boundaries, in the sense of like being able to hear things, being able to see things, being able to travel, picking up psychic abilities. I know people who, after Kundalini experience, could hear other people's thoughts. For example, it can be very disorienting because the shell that you think you were up till about a second ago is just not there. Have you ever had an experience of Kundalini awakening?
Not exactly in the way that you describe it, and I haven't done any specific practice around it, but I have had transcendent experiences. And when I was thinking about the transcendent and about how to then come back into the body, I was thinking specifically about this experience that I had with psilocybin. And it was my first real transcendent experience where I felt like I was absorbed into the river of consciousness, the oneness, and I could feel the oneness. And fear completely evaporated from me in that moment. And I was able to ask questions and get answers immediately. And I felt my ancestors and everybody, everything was just all one. And what was so interesting is after I came back into my body, then actually around a lot of people for the days following that, and people kept coming up to me. This was a new experience, and just people I didn't know or didn't know very well, and just started pouring their hearts out to me and crying and talking about deceased loved ones. And I wasn't asking questions, it just came. They came to me, and this emotion started flowing. And it was so significant that when my trip was over, the actual physical trip that I was on a cruise. I was in the airport and I'm like, I have to get to my next place now. I need to get back into this world and I can't keep having people come to me. And I don't know how to shut this off. And so I put my head down in the airport. I'm not making eye contact with anybody. I'm doing the best that I can to whatever frequency I got to. I needed it to just stop so I could make my plane. And despite my best intentions, I sit down, I got a bite to eat, and the guy who sat down next to me, same thing, just started talking about the trip he was going on and how he's been estranged from his son and how he was going to see him, and tears started flowing. When I got back home, it just naturally shut down. But as someone who has been in those kinds of experiences and helped people get back into their bodies, what advice do you have when you have these transcendent experiences, how to be intentional about coming back into your body?
That's the core question, isn't it? Because that's the piece our religions have cut out. That is the divine feminine. Now, I'm going to tell you the frame story according to Tantra of the goddess, and that's going to help really create the frame for this particular conversation. I call that the transcendence hangover, what you just said. How do you
Okay.
come back into form after a transcendent experience? When you haven't been taught how to come back into form, you get a transcendence hangover and it hurts. It's like a
Yeah.
real hangover. It's like, oh my God, I failed, or oh my goodness, I can't shut this off, or oh my goodness, like I need to pick up my kids from school, or oh my goodness, like I now have this crazy perspective on life. This is all just a mess. This is a trash show. Like I can't even believe I'm back in this smallness. You know, like there's just so many
Right.
ways that you can experience a hangover, right? So here's the
Hangovers are
frame
great.
story.
That's the perfect way to describe it. And I've experienced it many, many times. Yeah, hangover, exactly.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
transcendence hangover.
Yeah.
So in the tantras, in specific tantras, it is said that the goddess is so in love with her beloved, with God, who is transcendence, who's infinity, who is the infinite field, untouchable, unblemishable, that she emerges out of him in order to give him the one thing that he doesn't have. She is so in love with him that she creates herself out of him in order to then reflect back and give him something that he doesn't have. So what's the one thing infinity doesn't have? Limitation,
Yeah, right.
form, time,
Yeah.
space and time, right? Limitation and form, boundary, edge, limitation, right? The divine feminine as pulsation. What is pulsation? What is vibration? It is limitation. It's boundary, it's edge. Now, let's take that for a second and realize that the more limited we are, the more bound up we are, the more small we are, actually, the more impossible we are. It is impossible to divide, cut, or edge infinity. It's impossible. You can't do it. So the more limited someone thinks they are, the smaller someone thinks they are, in some ways, that is the highest expression of the divine feminine, because it is the most impossible. The more dense, the more condensed, and the more boundaried and limited you are, the more you see the goddess at play. So now that we've stated that she's vibration, boundary, limitation, and form, you now get to play with opposites. Now you get to talk about like her ability to hold grief and joy at the same time, anxiety and tremendous peace at the same time, the transcendent experience and the guy sitting next to you at the airport at the same time, which, like if that happened to me, I'd probably be a little frustrated, but then also compassionate, right? Like our ability to hold all of these really deeply opposite experiences at the exact same time. When we recognize that that's what's happening, that we're holding opposites, what happens is reverence. It doesn't diminish reality. Reality doesn't just like all of a sudden become like a bliss show. That's not the nature of opposites. What happens is it gets infused with reverence. And then reverence becomes the core experience of this life. The reverence for everything. Well, here's that now. Well, that sucks. But that doesn't diminish my reverence for it, right? So the transcendence hangover, really the only way to address it truly, and I'm talking at the non-dual level, is to understand that her highest sovereignty, her highest act of love and devotion is in the condensation. So as you are coming out of the transcendent experience, what are you doing? You're actually taking the journey of the divine feminine. You're coming into form. You're condensing. You're like the smoke or the fog on the window pane that all of a sudden gets like dense enough to form into the water droplet. And then you start to see the water droplet come in. And then you start to see the water droplet create like a line down the window. And it gets more and more condensed. And if you can follow that process over and over again, forget the transcendence. Like transcendence is our base. That is who we are. It's kind of just the basic background of like I kind of want to just like demystify. We think of transcendence as this like enlightenment we're going to get. No, like that is our nature, right? Now, what's really interesting is anytime you have that experience, track what happens after. The coming back into form is radically alive, radically full of pulsation. And when you follow that pulsation, then pulsation and silence, paradoxically, become the same thing. So transcendence and movement become the exact same thing. This happens a few times in a transcendent experience. You track it back again, you track it back again, you track it back again. And then all of a sudden, there's no such thing as a transcendent experience anymore because there's no such thing as an ordinary experience anymore. It's like, same thing's happening here. Pulsation and stillness are still happening.
And so what it sounds like you're saying too is that we don't need to have these transcendent experiences to fully understand and to fully experience and have the reverence that
Well,
sounds
reverence
like
is
it's
the
kind of the
beginning,
goal.
middle, and end.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think what I'm saying is that there is no goal. There's only process. There's no goal. And goal is a masculine concept. Goal is death, right? What is goal? Goal is like I win or lose at life. That's what a goal is. A goal is a line in the sand that I can cross. But process is forever. Like what happens at the end of the story? What happens at the end of the fairy tale? So you marry your princess or your prince. Like that's the goal, right? Of the romance. Okay. Now I've been married 20 years. I can promise you it doesn't end there, right? So process is where the divine feminine comes back again and again and again because we're constantly coming into form. And if you can, and by the way, I do think you need the transcendent experience because it's our nature. And because stillness is exactly as important as pulsation, we just can't put it on a pedestal. We just can't be like, well, that's better than, or that's more correct than, or that's more real than. It's not more real, right? It's exactly as real as. But when you're in the river of consciousness, doesn't that river of consciousness need the banks and the bed of the river to hold the river? Right? So you need the transcendent experience to hold the structure, the space for the river to flow. You need both exactly.
Would you say there's a difference between reverence and love? They seem to kind of, in my mind, hold the same kind of vibration. Would you say so?
I don't know. It's a great question. So for you, that feels like the same kind of vibration?
Yeah, because I kind of feel like love is everything. And to love everything is what our purpose here on earth is, actually. And so the word reverence is kind of in the same vein.
Yeah, I hear the way you're framing that. That's really beautiful. I feel it too when you say that. Yeah, yeah,
Maybe
that's
love
beautiful.
words are all, I think, limited so, in so many different ways, and it's whatever resonates with different people. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling what you're saying about reverence. And so this concept of there not being a goal, I think, is really difficult for people to understand and accept. I feel like I can understand it on a logical level, but if there is no goal, what do we do?
Have you ever experienced a goal? I mean,
Well,
logically, right? But because like I'm just challenging, is
yeah.
that logic or is that conditioning? Because like I guess I can only reflect back on myself, but like I've never experienced a true I mean, I have degrees. I'm in graduate school. Like there's deadlines for me to submit things, but that doesn't mean I stop thinking about
Mm,
those things. Like I don't know that I've ever experienced a goal.
mm,
Like, okay, so I gave birth to 2 children. I suppose they crossed some finish line there, and it's marked by a time and a space on a calendar, but, like, didn't they exist in other ways already, and didn't they continue after that? I don't know, like, I
yes.
guess I've never experienced this thing called goal. I'd have to really sit and think about it, but I'd almost go the opposite end and say I've experienced plenty of process.
Yeah, definitely. Huh. I have so many thoughts and no thoughts at the same time, Cynthia. Really
That's totally
enjoying
fine. But that's the
pondering.
transcendence bias, right? Like we are
Yeah,
so conditioned. We don't even question the conditioning. It's
right.
like, well, of course there's a goal. But we don't even know who told us that. Like who told
Mhm,
us that, right? Like did we just accept it at some point? Because like look, our academia is a reflection of our religion. There's this incredible scholar named Jeffrey Kripal who writes about this in one of his books called The Flip. He really maps this out, where he talks about how even academia is a model of, I guess, I'm projecting now my own words onto what he's saying, but onto this transcendence bias, right? Because when you look at academia and what's honored in academia, first of all, I'm a religious studies academic. I'm in
mhm,
graduate school for this. Religious studies, the professors that teach religious studies, you're not supposed to be a practitioner. If you're a scholar, you're not really supposed to be a practitioner. Universities will not hire you if they know you're a practitioner. Even if you're a brilliant scholar, they won't hire you because they think that you're biased.
mhm,
Now, that's only possible to even have a precedence like that in a transcendence bias system, in a patriarchal system. Because the people that I know that are the least biased people in religious studies are practitioners, because practitioners want to investigate and they want to keep investigating and they're deeply curious. Now, the people who are not practitioners tend to get very rigid. This is how it is. This is not how it is, right? It's the opposite. It's exactly not how the system works. And that's what we are taught. So we're in academia, we're studying dead things and calling it the highest form of study. Physics? Okay, come on. You're studying theory, mind made up stuff. Whereas human stories and humanities are at the bottom rung of academia. So, what are we worshiping on level of most important to least important? Most important, things that don't even exist. Least important, stories, things that
mhm.
actually exist. Things that are the most important, things that are firmly within the masculine patriarchal model, things that are the least important, the way of Mother Reality, Mother Earth, the sitting around the circle and the telling of story, the sharing of grief, right? So, really, you can map all of our institutions as a direct outcome of our religious model. We've erased entire ways of listening to each other. But if you get people around and you start sharing stories, if I hear your story and you hear my story, then all of a sudden you're a human.
And so, yeah, so many of the religious texts I feel like are saying that, but we've kind of flipped it on its head again in this masculine way.
We have. And they didn't start off that way, the religions. It's a progression, right? Progressed deeper and deeper into it. I mean, even Judaism started off as a deity pair. You know, God had a wife. It took hundreds of years to kill her. But religions start off fairly well balanced. And it's really over time that the bias comes in again and again and again. You know, I'm reading this really interesting piece right now, this scholar who looks at across world mythologies. And there was this little thing he said. I'm going to investigate it. Maybe one of your listeners has something to say on this topic, but that in a lot of traditional societies, at least deep history here, there was the mythology that the women spoke and then mythology for the men. And somehow it's the mythology for the men that has come down to us in history. And the mythology, now there was always both, but the mythology for the women was somehow just erased. But there are certain places in history where you can actually see both streams happening, like in Egypt, for example. There was a lot of even sometimes priority for the feminine. For example, in the Father Sky, Mother Earth myth. Sorry if I'm going a little too far out there.
No, keep going, please.
Okay. In the Father Sky, Mother Earth schema, that's a daytime myth. That's only for daytime, where Father Sky is above and Mother Earth is below. And they're locked in sexual union. So like he's above, she's below. But what happens at nighttime? Well, you know, think the world goes upside down, right? So now she's above and he's below. That's nighttime. But in Egypt, they kept on to the female script, the female stream, where it's actually Mother Sky. The goddess of the sky is, when you see her, she's like up and over the mantle of the earth. So it gets really changed up in different religions and different histories. The ones that have come down to us, though, have been like over and over and over again the masculine narrative. And to such a degree that we don't even remember that there was a Mother Earth in the storyline at all. Now there's only Father Sky. I don't know what happened to Mother Earth. I mean, she was there for 20,000 years or more. And now it's like, wait, what? There's a Mother Earth? Oh yeah, guess what? Your body is made out of. And then you have people nowadays who genuinely think we can take this body, which is Earth, and like launch it into space and somehow it's gonna like survive on another planet? That's just crazy. This body is Mother Earth. I have a master's in nutrition. Like, we have more cells in our body. You stick your fingers in the dirt and there's bacteria in there that resonate and change with your nervous system. What makes us think that we're heads on sticks? And all we need to do is take this head on a stick and remove it somehow from the mother, and we'll be like, okay, colonizing another place? It's insanity.
It really is when you put it that way. I really feel like, and a lot of people, I think, have been feeling this, that we're in this moment where there's this remembering of the divine feminine and remembering the essence of who we are. What would you say about the time that we're in and what it means?
I definitely think she's waking up. I mean, look, I wasn't out there looking to become like a devotee of the goddess. You know, I wasn't out there being like, hey, Mama Earth, like, I'm going to do some. No way. In fact, when I had Kundalini awakening, I fought. I was like, I can't handle this. Like, no, please, like, cut me a break. I was like not a willing recipient of possession by the goddess, but she's in charge of the show, right? So she's coming in to form because we're her. We are her. She's remembering through our body. Who's looking out of your eyes? The goddess. Who's feeling your skin? The goddess. This is her. We are her body. And every once in a while, we get to remember that. Now, for those of us who happen to have some of our like internal cracks are open, like we're not hard shells, she's going to come into those cracks. That's actually how it's described in the texts. She's going to hook her way in. That's actually the origin of the chakras, believe it or not. That's what the chakras are. They're
Really?
vibrational doorways into the goddess taking possession
That makes so much sense.
of the deep body. And so, yes. And she's not just waking up in people who are like spiritually primed, but guess what, Sarah? We're doing so many spiritual technologies. We're doing Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga and Reiki and massage and trauma work. We're sitting with therapists. We're asking questions. We're paying attention to our grief. These create openings within us. And then through that opening, what's going to happen? She's going to come right on in the second she can. And by the way, when she comes in thought, in dream, in sensation, in vibration. She really comes in dream, by the way. She really comes in dream. And when she comes in, she's very specific. So like usually it's a very specific signature of a goddess that comes into somebody. It's not like I just have this like effusive sense of the divine feminine. It's usually like, hey, Cynthia, there was this goddess that I had a dream about, and she had 8 arms, and she was holding her head in her hand, and there was blood pouring out of her neck, and she was holding this like curved knife in her hand, and it was really scary, and I don't know who that was, but can you tell me? And I'm like, girl, I know exactly who that was. Like, that's not subtle. She's not subtle when she comes in. And by the way, she also doesn't care what your relationship is ancestrally, because we're very complex beings, right? So she'll come to people in whatever that form is, so long as there's an opening. And one of the most, I would say, up goddesses right now for a lot of people is Mary Magdalene. She's coming to a lot of people right now. But also a lot of the tantric goddesses are coming to people as well.
So who are some of the tantric goddesses that might be appearing?
Whew. Okay. Some of them, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of tantric goddesses, many, many. And by the way, Tantra isn't just Hindu Tantra, right?
Right.
Tantra, there's many Tantras. There's dualistic Tantras. There's non-dualistic Tantras. There's Jain Tantra. There's Buddhist Tantra, which we call Tibetan Buddhism. There's actually many Buddhist Tantras because there's also different Indonesian, Japanese, many different tantras. And in the Buddhist tantras, one of the most interesting goddesses is Tara. There's also Vajra Yogini. She's intense. She's kind of the Buddhist Kali or Chinnamasta. Yeah, so Chinnamasta is another one, but there's a lot of crossover in these traditions. And when you really look back at the history of these traditions, a lot of the Buddhist tantras are actually picking up the Shaiva tantra goddesses and then adapting them into their traditions. There's a really beautiful history of cross-pollination. We could call it a history, the correct term really, but this is the correct term for all religious history, is appropriation. Gods and goddesses are appropriated back and forth in traditions all the time. Buddhism is an appropriation of the Vedic religion. And then yoga appropriates Buddhism. Yoga also appropriates Jainism. Buddhism appropriates Jainism. That's the correct word to be using, because we see these traditions, humans historically will see these traditions and resonate with them and then start making it their own, right? And so these goddesses are chameleon-like. Like they have many different lives. I study Kali. Do you know how many Kalis there are? There are so many Kalis. There are so many Kalis. Even in the Krama tradition of Tantra, of non-dual Tantra, there are many, many Kalis. So there's not just one form of even a single goddess. There's many forms of a single goddess. And then even that, she has changes and shifts as she travels and gets appropriated into different traditions, because the Kali that was appropriated into Orthodox Brahmanism is a very different Kali than the Buddhist Kali, right? Than the one that travels elsewhere. So yeah, who she is, I don't know. Who is she to you? Like that's where I end, right? Where I'm like, well, okay, so yes, we can name her and there is a map for her, but like, who is she to you, right? Have you had a relationship to a goddess?
Me personally, no, lots of goddesses have come to me throughout time, throughout my existence on this earth. But the thing that came to me is going back to the beginning of our conversation is maybe the point isn't who the goddess is and what she represents, but it's the reverence that we have for her and for
Yeah.
every.
Yeah. So the model that I teach of the heart, these like 4+1 layers of the heart, come out of a specific medieval teacher named Utpaladeva. I'm certain I studied with him because I have been wildly, irrevocably in love with Utpaladeva since the moment I heard his name. And the entire reason I'm in graduate school right now is to study him and his texts, only a few of which have been properly, really deeply translated. And there's only a couple of scholars doing that work. But that model is the way that he describes reality, this 4+1 layers in his own way, slightly different, but in his own way. I'm trying to bring his very complex philosophical mind into kind of like plain English.
Right.
But devotion is really what he names as the most important of really the entire of everything. Now, there's this text that he wrote. He's a very formidable thinker. I mean, like the logic, and he goes into understanding the ontology and cosmology of all the other religious schools around him so that he can annihilate them. This is how religious philosophy has always been. That's what religion is you get these like philosophers, you think they're like gurus on a hill. No, they're gurus who are like, hey, my system's better than yours and I'm going to debate you. And whoever wins the debate wins the kingdom, right? So these are like hardcore debaters. And sometimes actually what's at stake is like pretty big, right? You
Right.
got these like people debating, right? And it's like win or lose the kingdom based on who wins the debate. So despite his like deep philosophy and his thinking, he has this text, which I think is the most beautiful text of any religious text ever written, called the Shiva Stotravali. And its stanzas essentially devotion to Shiva. And again in this text, he says things like, let me be dualistic, let me be in love with reality as it's limited, because that's how you've presented it to me. Let me be devastated. Let me be all of the range of human emotions. The only thing that I ask of you is let me stay devoted. Let me stay reverent to you. I don't care about enlightenment. I don't care about being intelligent. I don't need to win the argument. Let me just be a devotee. And he says this over and over again. He even gets mad at God. So to him, God Shiva, right? So he'll say things like, hey, God, hey, Shiva, you're a liar. I have found you out. You are a scam. You don't even exist. And then he'll come back again and he'll be like, I didn't mean what I said. I really love you. You know, but basically what he's doing in this text is he's showing the full range of human emotions. This is an extremely, probably one of the most, intelligent spiritual teachers and a lineage holding guru who transmits, the text transmits, right? But what he's doing is he's showing his devotees and the students in his lineage that we are meant to have a full range of human emotions. Don't beige wash reality. Don't be like, hey, you're not allowed to have these emotions. No, he's at the highest level of spiritual awakening, and he's showing a full range of emotions, including skepticism, including like anger at the divine, including joy at the divine. And the thing that he says over and over again is take it all, but don't take my devotion. Don't take my reverence.
Wow. It's really profound. And the thing that jumped out to me in what you said too is just how kind of ego-filled he is. And we're told to dissolve the ego, to let go of it and transcend. But that's actually not it. The ego is necessary.
No,
And
not even close. What do you think?
yeah.
Yeah, that's the ego trap. It's a spiritual ego trap. The ego trap is thinking there's such thing as enlightenment. That's the highest level of spiritual ego. That's the highest level of ego trap there is. When you think there's something called enlightenment and that you've achieved it. When I had my enlightenment, right? Let me tell you about my enlightenment, right? Because you know what enlightenment implies? It implies that there's such thing as not enlightened. You've literally just created duality by claiming enlightenment. You've
Right.
just created duality. That's the spiritual trap. That's the trap.
Yep.
Yeah, experience the full range of human emotions. You know that they call the transcendence biased traditions, because there's a lot of non-duality in the Indian philosophical systems. There's different forms of Vedanta. Then there's the Buddhist non-dualists, the Vijnanavadins, for example. And Utpaladeva spends a lot of time analyzing why those are not real non-dualities. He says, if you've only accepted half of reality, you're not a non-dualist. That's not
Yeah.
non-duality. And then they
I
take it a
have-
step further, by the way.
Yeah.
They take it a step further. So Utpaladeva and Abhinavagupta, not only do they say that's not non-duality, but they say, you do you. You can call it whatever you want to call it. And at whatever layer you are of reality, that's what's going to be real for you. They don't care. They're not trying to change their minds. They're not telling them we're right, you're wrong. They're telling them you do you. It's not the last step in the circle, but to you, it's true.
Just to close out, I have so many questions, and my brain is kind of racing, and I'm being brought back to my days as a religion major in college too, and feeling called to go back to some of the texts that I love so much. But how does this all translate into real life? Ultimately, people want to have ease and happiness and joy in their life. How does all of this enable that? Or does it?
I've only ever experienced ease, happiness, and joy when I've included all parts of myself. When I've tried to cut out parts of myself, I call that suffering. So to include my body and to include the lived experience, that to me is the returning home to the whole heart. I think that the only reason these conversations matter is to have more ease in our lives, right? Like the only reason to talk about the transcendence bias is to be like, hey, where are you holding it? I'll tell you where I'm holding it. I'm not telling you I'm over it. I still fall into that one all the time. I should be more quiet. Oh, I should be more present, right? Like I have layers and layers inside of me of conditioning on these topics. I was also raised, in religious schools and all of these things. So like, I'm not beyond any of this, but I'm curious about it, and being curious makes me more easeful. Like, where is my anxiety? Where is it? Where does it live in me? And why is it there? Because I'll tell you something, anxiety is always somewhere that I've made a bargain with life.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. Cynthia, I am so excited to read your book. When does it come out?
It comes out January 20th, and it's called Embodying the Goddess: How to Awaken Curiosity and Reverence on the Spiritual Path. So really, that's what I call the goddess, is curiosity and reverence. If there are two English words that we should use, not light, not like, right? Because, when we say like the goddess is light or the goddess is an archetype, oh my God, we've just limited her so much by doing that. Because she's all of it. She's also dark. In fact, she's like the earth, right? The earth is like really dark and dense and mineral rich. And there's caves. She's
Yeah.
all of it. So, and she's not an archetype either, because an archetype is like a pattern within the whole. She's the whole. She can be a pattern in the whole. She can be an archetype, but she's also the whole. So what I call her in plain English words is curiosity and reverence.
I love that so much. And I will carry that. That's what it's all about, I suppose. Curiosity and reverence. And that's how I try to fill as many of my days as possible. Cynthia, thank you so much
That's
for this
beautiful.
conversation. I'd love to follow up again sometime after I read your book, because I think that I'll have more concrete questions for you after reading it. But thank you so much. I'm so excited to get it on January 20th.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having the conversation, and I'm also excited. I'm excited that there are so many people out there. Isn't it amazing how many people there are out there that are like, hey, I'm doing all this deconditioning work and things that I thought were true aren't true, and let's talk about it, right? Like to me, when I hear people talking about these things, you could call it trauma work, honestly. I hear some of those conversations and I'm like, yep, there she is. She's waking up. She's awake. There's the goddess.
I say all the time that as complicated as the world is right now, it is an amazing time to be alive. I don't think I would want to be alive any other time. This is just truly, truly a
Well, then there you
blessing.
go.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for tuning in to Goddess in Training. I hope something in this episode stirred your knowing or softened your heart. If it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it, or leave a review or comment to help others find us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more conversations like this, please consider supporting Goddess in Training on Patreon. For more tools and offerings to deepen your intuition practice, visit goddessintraining.online. You can also join the Scroll of Sashat on Substack for twice-weekly stories of how I followed my intuition. The music for Goddess in Training is Madre Ayahuasca by Arkawa, and you can find more of his music in the link to his website in the show notes. Remember, your intuition is not a mystery, it's a memory. Keep listening.
Resplandor del fuego, estrellita, tabaco santo, fuerza de rapé, soplo de